glory, honor, the peak of empires, the peak of nations, where glory, might, and power glows brighter than ever before. And no, I cannot use the setting I made for the last episode for this. Why, you ask me? Well, because it's literally a post-apocalyptic setting where city-states are emerging out of the rubbles of a steampunk empire that ruled the planet. While it is an isekai, it isn't the sort of world where you can see amazing stuff, it's more the "get me the fuck out of here" type. So I cannot use it for this, unfortunately. So instead I'm gonna use the History Channel stuff. Don't worry, I cut the alien stuff and conspiracy theories out.
Maybe you got rid of that old yee ass haircut you got, you get some bitches on your dick.
My therapist has literally censored it because of the last incident, so no worries. And no, I'm not adding images I draw to this one because I'm not good, I don't have a drawing pad, and I'm poor. I'm more worried about the next job interview. Anyways, welcome back to part 3 out of 4 with possible addendums. I can't keep doing this forever, even if I can. And me. Anyways, back to the topic. So the peak or the so-called golden age of a civilization, which lends more utopianism as I researched this and found it on Wikipedia, because people generally have a tendency to see more of a fictional moment of when a civilization, nation or empire is at its literal peak of existence. In reality, that is entirely correct. I know the intro made it seem like we're gonna talk of the golden ages, well we will, but this is generally more of an imaginary past that is generally attached to people with unsavory opinions. Don't get me wrong, golden ages can occur for peoples, but some times it's heavily exaggerated. Nevertheless, it's still a topic I needed to touch on, even if I feel like it's a topic with little explanation to attach. Well, to help myself, let's define a golden age. Most of the time, it's when a civilization, state, culture, or whatever entity of a collective group reaches a peak. You can define differently, of course. That peak can also mean just wealth, prosperity, population, a lot of things. That can also heavily vary on what beliefs you subscribe to as well. So to simplify and make it easier for me than to fall again into the debate pool that I nearly climbed out of it dead, let me just nail down the definition of golden age under a period in which an organization, group or state reached a population rise, peace, stability, or simply put, a prosperity age of some kind. Even if that might be inaccurate, but hells be damned, because this topic has a tendency to make people start fires. Anyways, let's do this. So when we last talked, we talked of what is an empire and how empires begin, as petty cities growing in the farmlands or simply kingdoms growing mighty over time, or whatever figures your mood for writing in the moment. But now we talk of the peak of civilizations, when empires grow and reach its apex, when gold and silver flow in mass, or if you're criticizing when war crimes get a bit too much. Of course you can argue it's more made during the rise, but can also fit. When a political entity enters its golden age, it also comes with questions of what sort of society you created, what sort of people will inhabit it, and what sort of culture exists in it. For a civilization or a state in a golden age, for a people generally means the arrival of times of prosperity and peace, most of the time. For a warlike culture it means the end of threats, but also the end of lands to conquer, such as the Roman Empire. Well, one of their golden ages. For the Republic era, probably it was when Carthage went up in smoke. For merchant-oriented peoples, their golden age is attached to the wealth of their residents. For the most part. Sometimes it can also just mean controlling trade outposts or trade zones across an entire region, just like the merchant republics of Italy. Other times, and most likely for writers, an empire at its height is experiencing its best time, legions in grand numbers, wealth uncountable, and stability unparalleled. Unparalleled? Oh, for Christ. Of course, this isn't the moment in time where stuff could be interesting for a writer, well, a beginner at least. If you have a creative spark and ideas, you probably are thinking of ideas by now of what to set in this moment in time. So unlike the rise of empires, where I had to discuss, well, a lot and condense a lot, In here there is also a lot of for God. Well, it's not as bad as the previous one, but it also covers a lot of deep complexities involving state prosperity and, well, I think you understand when I am skipping a lot here, because damn, it hits a lot home, but it also hits a lot far. This is the sort of thing that it would need infinite addendums. Well, let us do something that I feel like I skipped in part 2. Let us talk about what possibilities of stories can be said in this moment. So, dealing with stories set in times of peace and prosperity of civilizations, states and empires, it can generally be said that they can be the least fight-intensive stories. Like, the stories set in these situations will be mystery stories, politics, etc. In reality, this is a lie. Things can still be very fight-intensive or exciting. No story is boring after all. It's only boring if you think you are unable to do anything with it. A lack of confidence can also make you unable to think your story is good. I know it does a lot of that to me. But stories can also be told very well in times of prosperity and peace. Generally also in times of golden ages, it doesn't also mean a time of peace. I mean, it's amazing to see stories set during the high time of things, when things were more cool and awesome. Let's face it, if you read or seen the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, or saw the show, a lot more people saw the show than read the books, let's face it, then you absolutely would understand why you would like to see a show set in the times when dragons were more common rather than there were only existing 3 of them.
Oh, gods be blessed.
Well, until a certain season did a number in the hype and the story. But let's not talk about that, let's not kill the mood. Many parts of it are technically still canon. Overall, we're talking of the heyday of things, where things were not necessarily perfect, they were quite amazing still. A civilization always reaches a golden age. And while some unsavory folks say everything's downhill from there, it's not always. Cultures, civilizations, nations, and others bounce between fine times and bad times and great to terrible times all the time. Unless stuff happens between, but it's the talk for the next video. In fantasy settings, the best general writing rule in worldbuilding, a golden age, is just, well, a great ruler creating one. It's quite common of a trope, there's no issues with it. At the same time, in sci-fi and more modern settings, a good time can start via stability at home and wealth pouring in from it or from abroad. It also works in fantasy if you want to be sure. Now, what sort of stories can use a golden age of an empire or civilization? Well, put it bluntly, maintaining the situation is generally a good one. Be it from stopping a temporary abuse in the situation and ending the golden age. Issues with this sort of story, well, it causes a status quo story where the protagonists are fighting to maintain the current situation. If the situation is, well, utopian, congrats, but if it is 80s Britain or 1941's then you get the gist. Maintaining a good time is, well, good as long as the road you made sustains that concept. Or you can be a writer that just thinks that a flawed system is worth sustaining because all others are bad, even if that system is leading to a catastrophe. I'm not calling names, but I can bet you are thinking of someone. Now, the stories that are more grey, one can simply focus on the pains that are caused to sustain the prosperity of the people at home. Not everything is free after all. For example, the Aztec Golden Age was marked by its greatest territorial growth and power accumulation, at the cost of, well, tribute paying, sacrifice making, and if accounts are correct, a level of brutality. Another example, Rome reached its golden age, or Pax Romana, was marked by the greatest extent of Rome and also its power over Europe. And also Rome was an agricultural state built on the back of massive amounts of slavery. Every nation on earth has blood on its hands. How the civilizations sustain themselves is up to you to decide. For empires, it is way more common to be built on a form of exploitation. Of course, that comes with the complications, but welcome to complexity. In more grey stories, nations at their peak generally have main characters drive the story, questioning if the actions of their people are good ones. nations, especially as we enter the complex zone of asking ourselves if the prosperity of a nation is truly built upon the works of a people or the exploitation of others. This can be a very touchy subject,
No shit!
especially as international free trade exposed that rich nations seem to not care about the situation of poor nations as long as they get cheap stuff. Of course, commentary about writing aside, the peak of nations also world-building wise represents possibly a time of relative calm. Sometimes, mercantilism meanwhile can also enter the discussion as wealth pours in from trade, but when dealing with economics, I'm not an economist, so good luck. But sometimes folks ask, can an empire collapse in the height of its power or in its golden age? Yes, it can. The Aztec Empire had achieved total domination of its neighbors, subjugating them to their tribute system. Their armies were unbeatable, their allies were unshakable on their strength. Commerce and prosperity had achieved levels never seen before. It all culminated in 1815. There was no way the Aztecs could fall. Yes, it can happen. Things are not fixed in stone permanently or forever. Things can change quite quickly, like at a snap of a finger. Albeit this is more history-wise. Narrative-wise, it's difficult to justify a civilization at the peak of its power collapsing into itself extremely quickly. But this happened a lot. If you are a fan of learning history like me or have read a lot, you know the quote, the difference between fiction and reality. Fiction has to make sense. This is the kind of gist we are dealing with. People need to see, check, watch, basically a lot of things to know the weaknesses that resulted in your faction collapsing from its top to its bottom in under little over a few years or over a decade, but over a decade is more easy to justify than 3 years. Let's just say you might need heavy usage of foreshadowing. Well, thanks for watching. This was not precisely a lot easy to record. Real life takes a lot of priority, and in all honesty, having my equipment that I use be borrowed, and when I mean borrowed, I mean I am borrowing it, doesn't make it easy to record new videos. Either way, next time I'm going to talk about how empires fall, and trust me, it's not as good as you can think. Either way, thanks for watching, and if you're like, please hit the subscribe button. I fucking hate that we need to say this shit. I'm going to have